Good evening, everyone, to our audience here and to our online participants. My name is Colleen Kerr. I'm Vice President for External Affairs and Government Relations at Washington State University. And I want to welcome you to participating in the joint Washington State University and Washington State Department of Transportation online forum regarding road safety for the roads that come in or around Pullman. So what we're going to do this evening is I'll introduce the panelists, and then we'll have some brief introductions from a few of them. And we're going to have some presentations from WSDOT. And then there will be the very important opportunity for those who are online or in the audience to submit questions. We have some questions that were submitted in advance, so that'll be able to get us going. But for those of you who are watching online and who are participating that way, I want to give you two ways to connect with us. You, on the YouTube feed, you can enter questions or comments in the chat window. We are monitoring them, and so we will be able to transmit those to the panel. You can also email questions directly, and bear with me for the email address. It is sr26us195@wsdot.wa.gov. And I will repeat that information a couple of times as we proceed here. But let me go ahead and walk through the panel. So to my right, I have Dr. Dan Bernardo. He is the interim president for Washington State University. To Dan's right, we have Mike Frucci, and Mike Frucci is the acting regional administrator for Eastern Washington. We then have Glenn Wagaman, who is the Eastern Region traffic engineer for WSDOT. Then we have Sergeant Courtney Shawley, who is with Washington State Patrol. Then we have an alum and state senator for the Washington's 6th legislative district, Spokane area, but from Pullman. He is here. To his right, we have Doreen Boyle. Doreen is a Coug mom, so she has a daughter who is in her final year at Washington State University. She also started the online petition about road safety. It was started through social media. It had over 6,000 signatures, and so she helped us kind of pull this event together and has reached out to a number of our online participants. So I really want to give a special thank you to you for this whole process and for participating this evening. Next to Doreen, we have Bob Hilmes, who is an engineer with WSDOT. And then finally, last but certainly not least, and going to address some important issues with us tonight, is Dr. Melinda Husky, who is our Vice President for Student Services. And she'll be able to help us talk about how we can kind of institutionalize this at Washington State University in an online way and help with the student perspective for road safety. So what I want to do first is hand it over to Dr. Bernardo to give a brief welcome and give an overview from a WSU perspective.
Thank you, Colleen. Well, first of all, welcome to people connecting to us online, and I certainly want to extend a welcome and a thank you to our friends from WSDOT, State Patrol, Senator Baumgardner, and others in the audience and on the panel. It's an important topic for us, and we really do appreciate WSDOT in particular suggesting this type of event to help promote a dialogue about traffic safety in and around Pullman. As president of Washington State University, my number one priority is the safety of our faculty, our students, and our staff. And that anybody that's heard me talk to our parents during orientation knows that that is an important message that I deliver, and one of the things that I say is that we will do everything in our power to ensure the safety of their student. Obviously, there are many risks in a university community, some of them very unfortunate, as we know, with mass shootings on campuses, et cetera. But obviously, we're concerned about all sources of risk and making sure that we do everything we can to assure that our students have a safe and successful experience at WSU. Obviously, the issue of safety on our highways was elevated this past Thanksgiving when, unfortunately, WSU lost two of its precious students, two young co-eds, freshman students, one on Highway 195, one on Highway 26, just 2 days apart from one another. I attended the candlelight vigil for those two young ladies. They were both sorority members, and I can tell you that I don't think there was anything that I've experienced on my 30 years of career at universities that tugged at my heart so much as that night. we need to do everything we can to assure that we don't have to attend another one of those. WSU is a growing institution. We have grown our student body about 30% over the last 7 or 8 years. We have grown the faculty and staff at an even higher and more elevated rate than that. So the community of Pullman is growing rapidly. Obviously, the arteries, the highways to and from Pullman are a challenge because of that tremendous growth. And the fact that admittedly we have a relatively high-risk population that attends Washington State University. We are a very traditional school in terms of the age distribution of our students, so the predominant age demographic is certainly somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 to 22. We are also very much a local Washington serving institution. We have 85% of our students from the state of Washington, and so just about every one of those 85% is moving in and out of Pullman via road. So appreciate the opportunity to have a dialogue and just look for some positive steps we can take to assure the safety of our students. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Senator Baumgartner, thank you so much for coming. Thank you for your advocacy for Washington State University and your willingness to participate tonight. We would love to hear from you.
Well, thanks. It's great to be back on campus. I graduated from WSU in 1999 with a degree in economics, and it felt like home then. It still feels like home now, so it's good to be home. I guess I'd like to start by thanking WSU and WSDOT for putting this program together. I think this is really public policy done right, where we have had decisions made by the legislature and the spending allocation made, and this process that has been gone through in the last year or so to engage the public on how should these funds be spent on highways 195 and 26, and what are the other critical needs in getting students and the general public to and from Pullman safely. I think that's very, very important. So I think this is an important forum, and I think it's neat that we're using technology to touch people all across the state. So it's exciting. The state does not do big transportation projects very frequently. Their big transportation spending plans very frequently. We did one last year in the legislature, working in a bipartisan fashion, Republicans and Democrats working together, and we came together to do about a $15 billion transportation spending plan that will be financed by about a 12-cent increase in the price of a gallon of gasoline in the state. And so those are tough things to put together. There's a lot of sausage making in that process. Most people want more roads, and most people want more roads quickly, but most people also have concerns about paying for those new roads, and understandably in this state. I think Eastern Washington did very well in their transportation spending relative to previous years. In the past, we had received maybe on the order of 60 to 70 cents on the dollar for transportation spending in this part of the state. And now we're going to receive over $1.20 in our return, and over $1 billion in Spokane County, where I reside, and including finally enough money to finish our North-South Freeway. I was a strong advocate and very involved in additional funding for 195 and in 26, Highway 26, for kind of 3 reasons. The first reason was how important and special our universities are in this state and what they provide to our economy, and how much capital infrastructure the public has invested in Pullman, that we can't isolate Pullman. You think about how many dollars have been spent here and the magic of innovation that goes on, the technology transfer and those things. So the more we connect our universities to the rest of the state, the better return on investment we'll get from our universities. And that's where I think 195 and 26 are more important than just general roads because of that economic impact. Obviously, we have a lot of young people traveling on these roads. And so that's the second reason, is we need to get people back and forth safely. Some of that's the engineering, but I think probably even more we'll hear about has to do with driver behavior and other issues. So those are the first two reasons. And then the third reason is very personal, which is my 4 kids have a grandmother and a grandfather here in Pullman, and we drive down from Spokane to 195 fairly frequently. And as we make that drive, my little boy Conrad, my 4.5-year-old, says frequently, "Daddy, how many more minutes to Pullman?" And we count down from 75 to under 5. And so it's for that reason, is the third reason that we put this funding in. So, and I'll just close by saying this, and hopefully we'll get some questions, which is, the public listening at home, these are your resources, these are your highways, these are your dollars, and these are decisions. And it's, if you want better decisions made, which we all do, get involved in the process like you're doing here tonight by participating, by letting folks know, because because we've made some of these decisions doesn't mean we couldn't make more decisions in the future. And you always got to think about your state government as your state government, and these are your resources. So it is good to be here, and thanks for putting this together.
Yeah, that's a great point, Senator Baumgartner. Thank you. So Mike Frucci, we would love to hear from you from WSDOT too, to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. Thanks to everybody who is participating in this, and certainly to WSU for hosting this, and the great technology team that's here. We do a lot of public outreach, and we work pretty diligently to inform the public, but more importantly to get their thoughts and ideas. Doing it through this online forum is brand new for us, so we have a lot of confidence that this is going to work well, but thanks to the team here for helping us and knowing how to do it. And then thanks to all of you at home who are taking time out of your day to sit in front of your computer and interact with us. I want to especially thank Doreen Boyle. I already mentioned Cougar Mom, but she did a great job not only generating interest from the public in this topic, but then going back out when we decided to do this and trying to figure out how to contact all of those folks that had interest and get them the information that they needed to participate today. So thanks, Doreen. We're going to try to do some very brief sharing of information because it kind of sets the base for what these highways are and some of the data about them. And I think we're going to hear some interesting and important information from Washington State Patrol about observed driver behavior and how that impacts the highways. But the key is, and what we want to reserve the majority of the time for, is to hear your questions and your concerns, and I think for me, most importantly, your ideas. What are the ideas? We've already received a number of ideas through email, and I know Colleen is going to restate the email address a few times, but the ideas are important because oftentimes, a group of people, group dynamics is somebody will say something that gets built on by another person, and next thing you know, we have this great cost-effective idea, something that we can actually get done. So I'm going to end with that.
Thanks, Mike. So I was going to remind everyone of how you can get in touch. There's a chat window. If you're watching via YouTube, there's a chat window. You can enter questions directly into that chat window. You can also email questions. The email address is sr26us195@wsdot.wa.gov. We're going to move into 3 pretty quick presentations, quickly, relatively speaking, because we're getting questions. Already they're coming in, and I also have a list that came in earlier. So we'll go ahead and start with you, Sergeant Shawley. Looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having us, and thank you to Washington State University and WSDOT for allowing us to be part of this forum. The number one goal of the Washington State Patrol is to provide the best in public safety services for the citizens of our state. And specifically, what we're known for is providing them on our highways and interstates, our public roadways. For this forum, I was asked to discuss driving behavior that we have seen out on State Route 195. But before we discuss driving behavior, it's very important to distinguish between driving behavior and also driving performance. Differentiating between the two concepts will greatly enhance our discussion and eliminate any confusion. Driving performance is what the driver can do. and driving behavior is what the driver does do. So an example of each, driving performance is what the drivers can do, relates to the driver's knowledge, skills, perceptual and cognitive abilities. Driving behavior, or what the driver does do, is what the driver chooses to do with those abilities, knowledge, skill, and so forth. So for this forum, I'd like to share with you the behavior I have witnessed while on patrol and working collisions for the past 10 years on State Route 195. And also this information is also gathered from my colleagues that I've worked with, I'm 4 of which that have dedicated over 20 years of service to the state each, working State Route 195 and also State Route 26. I wish I could say driving behavior was good. Unfortunately, it's not. Whether it was day shift, night shift, winter with compact snow and ice on our roadways, or a beautiful Palouse sunny day in July, driving behavior was the factor in collisions I have worked on State Route 195, from a winter slide off all the way up to a fatality collision. The only exception to driving behavior not being the factor were vehicle animal collisions. A deer runs out into the roadway and the car can't stop in time and hits the deer. Those are the only ones that did not contribute to driving behavior. Some of the leading driving behavior causes that contributed to the collision, to these collisions, were speeding, following too closely, or as we have come to know it as tailgating, unsafe passing, and impaired driving, whether it be through drugs or alcohol. And unfortunately, the one driving behavior that has quickly leaped onto the scene, quickly trying to pass these other driving behaviors that I've listed with deadly consequences, is distracted driving. As a side note, the last 2 fatality collisions we have had on State Route 195 in Whitman County, distracted driving or a cell phone texting was the cause. We believe that changing driving behavior will have a significant and a positive impact on our roadways.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sergeant Shawley. We appreciate it. Next, we'll hear from Glenn Wagaman. Glenn, we're looking forward to hearing from you. I think you have information about highway collision analysis and traffic volumes, and I think that you have a PowerPoint presentation. Is that correct?
Yes. Most of my discussion tonight, you'll see slides up in front of you, and I'll be talking behind the scenes about those slides. So let's go ahead and go to slide number 1. So what I'd like to do is start and begin to show the comparison of what we call average annual daily traffic volumes. And these are on 2-lane roadways across all of Washington State. And so you can get a feel of the highway average annual daily volumes for like SR 904 is 17,000. You see US 2 between Monroe and Sultan, that's over on the west side, at 18,000. And across the board, you kind of see this. And what you see here for SR 26, near Othello, we're seeing about 3,000. And on US 195, we're seeing about 6,800 cars. So I'd like to begin with what does the data tell us about SR 26? So it's about 130 miles of roadway, and the roadway geometrics in this area are such that the lane widths vary from 11 to 12 feet and the shoulders from 4 to 8 feet. Traffic volumes, and when I talk this time, I'm going to be talking about average daily traffic, varies from around 1,100 vehicles a day, and that's at the location of SR 260 and 261. To 200 or to 600, 6,800, and that's in the vicinity of Othello Road, Othello. In 1967, volumes on SR 26 ranged from 330 to 2,600 to kind of give you a comparison. So when you take a look at slide 2, what you're going to see on slide 2 is that in 2014, the highest hourly volumes that were recorded were on November 30th of that month. And so that happened to be Apple Cup here at Washington State University on Saturday, the 29th. On the 30th, these were the highest volumes, so not only did you probably have students coming back to school, but you had fans going back home to their locations. But what we see here is that we see that the highest bidirectional hourly volume occurring between 1 p.m. and 2 p.m. And so if you added that total together, during that hour, there was approximately 1,100 vehicles there. In terms of speed, what we're seeing, the current average speed is 63 miles an hour, with the 85 percentile, or 85% of the vehicles, traveling at a speed near 68 miles an hour. Now, what's interesting is just today I found some data from 1996, and a speed study was done then, and the 85th percentile was approximately 65 miles per hour in the vicinity of SR 21, and 63 miles per hour in the vicinity of Washtenaw. So what we see is that speeds have essentially remained fairly constant during that time frame. So let's go to slide 3. So this is where you're going to see most of the discussion on what's happening out there in terms of the crash history. So in the time period from 2011 to 2015, there were 726 total crashes. Of those, the crash type, there was 178 intersection-related crashes, so 25%. And of those 178, 119, or 67%, were in the section from I-90 on the west end to Othello on the easterly edge. What we also saw in those 726 total crashes, that we saw 194 crashes that involved deer, elk, or other animals. So that related to about 27% of those 726 collisions. Of those, 158 of the 194 crashes were between US 395 and SR 127, so that kind of gives you the location. As far as non-intersection opposite direction crashes, so when you're out on a section where there are no roadways on either side or driveways, we saw 31 non-intersection opposite direction. And the contributing factors to those collisions in those cases were either apparently asleep, inattention, or under the influence. And improper passing was also a component of that. As far as roadway conditions, what we saw was 571, or 79% of those, happened in dry conditions. And 84 of those, 11%, happened in ice, slush, or snow conditions. So in terms of driver actions, overtaking and passing was noted in 33 of the crash. And so this is the action that the driver was taking when the crash happened. And improper passing was cited as the contributing factor in 18 of those 33. In 14 of those crashes, the driver was passing a left-turning vehicle. Contributing circumstances you'll see on that slide on the right, exceeding reasonable safe speed, 15% of those, and that's often used when conditions dictate driving at a lower speed, such as when a driver loses control of the vehicle on snow or ice, so they would have been exceeding reasonable safe speed. Inattention, we're seeing in these 5 years, 11% did not grant right-of-way. We're seeing 7% there, and that's usually associated with intersections. Apparently asleep or fatigued, we're seeing that at 7% of those totals. Under the influence, we're seeing at 4%, and you'll see on the far-hand right side of that graph is it says none and other, 38%, and that jumps out at you. But really, generally, that's related to crashes with animals, and that's what we saw as one of the highest collision types out there. So slide 4, please. On slide 4, what we're going to look at here is just the contributing circumstances that dealt with fatal fatality crashes and serious and injury crashes. And so these are contributing circumstances. And so when you look at this over center line, was the highest, where there was 3 fatalities associated with that, and then 1 in each of the areas shown there. And it's, in terms of the serious injuries, contributing circumstances, exceeding safe, reasonable speed had 4, inattention had 3, along with did not grant the right-of-way, and disregard for a stop sign was 2, and the other were minimal. So slide 5, please. If we look at this slide, the crash history in this area tells us that the age of the drivers on this, for when we look at driver action of overtaking and passing, there's 33 of those, that approximately 50% of those are between the ages of 15 and 25. And when we look at all crashes, all 726 of them, we see, again, that there's approximately 50% in the same age group from 15 to age 25. So we're going to move over to, so what does the data tell us about 195 operations? The geometrics in this area, the lane widths vary from 11 to 12 feet, and the shoulders are 4 to 10. Volumes, with the exception of Colfax, are generally varies between 3,400 to 7,200. Interesting information is in 1967, the volumes ranged from 2,600 to 3,800. So it has increased, but that's been a long time frame. In terms of speed, the current average speed that we're seeing out there is 61 miles per hour. And the 85th percentile, or the speed that 85% of the traffic is traveling, is 65 miles per hour. And what we did in 1996 as a speed study showed that the 85th percentile was at 60 miles per hour at Plaza and 60 miles per hour in the vicinity of SR 271, which is just south of Balder Road, and then 62 miles per hour in the vicinity of Finch Road. So 80% of the drivers drive between 50 and 65 miles per hour is what we're seeing. Slide 6, please. So now let's look at the crash history. There's 393 total crashes, and that does not include crashes in Colfax. So the major crash type there was 155 with fixed objects, or approximately 39%. 88 crashes with deer and elk or other non-domestic animals, that's 22%. We had 25 intersection-related crashes, 34 non-intersection opposing direction crashes at 8.7. So again, the contributing circumstance for these non-intersection related was exceeding safe speed, operating, defective equipment, under the influence, falling asleep, and inattention. So the roadway conditions during this time frame, of those 393 crashes, 204, 52%, happened in dry conditions, and 140, or 36%, happened on ice, snow, or slush. And the prominent driver action that was happening through that area was overtaking and passing. And improper passing was cited in the majority of those crashes. The contributing circumstances that you'll see on the graph on the right, exceeding reasonable safe speed was 30%, inattention was 10%, did not grant right-of-way to the vehicle was 7%, apparently asleep was 7%, and you can see some of the other numbers there. Slide 7, please. So when we take a look at US 195 and the contributing circumstances for just fatal and serious injury collisions, what we see is that there's really no pattern at this point of one overriding the other, so they are all at 1, showing a contributing factor. Of the serious injury crashes, there were 15 of them, And what we're seeing as the highs there is exceeding reasonable safe speed at 6, 4, we're inattention, and 4 over the center line. And if we look in terms of age of driver comparison, the results are similar to the data on SR 26, with the age group of 15 to 25 comprising approximately 50% of the crashes. So that's the data that I have that kind of sets the background. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Glenn. So before we move on to the next presentation, I just want to check on a couple of different points. I thought the information both you presented and that Sergeant Shawley presented was really interesting, because what we heard about is that a lot of this is about driver behavior, correct? And so we have the opportunity to influence driver behavior and to kind of create or to improve a culture of safety with the students who may be using those roads. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
So I thought it would be good to capture that. We went through the data so quickly and really appreciated both of your presentations. But I thought among that, which we can talk about later, is it was really interesting to hear that there might even be certain times of year when we could be addressing this issue to elevate the issue with the population, certainly at WSU, but even with the broader community. Great. So Bob, we'd love to hear from you about what's planned next for these roads.
Okay. I'm going to talk about the two funded projects we have, one for 195 and one for SR 26. So slide 8, please. So slide 8 is the 195 project, and the project is limits from Colfax to Spangle are the overall project limits. Within that, we're going to essentially establish 6 to 7 additional passing lanes. There's 3 existing passing lanes there now, and the overall map kind of gives you a larger scale view. But I want to step back and just kind of go through some of the steps we got to get there. So we went through and did a corridor planning crash analysis and determined what was happening with the crashes out there. And what the outcome of that was, a need, a desire for passing lanes. And so that was part of the thrust that was able to get this funded by the Connecting Washington. Thanks again, Mr. Baumgartner. Anyway, so now that we've got a funded project, we're moving forward. We've got a timeline to get the passing lanes dialed in where they fit the best. What's the ideal location? We've done some public outreach through community engagement. We've tapped into State Patrol. We had a technical advisory committee that helped develop the crash analysis study and kind of were involved with that process. We re-engaged them, but gave their help doing that as well. And so this is kind of the last-ditch effort for the 195 project. I'm looking for any comments that can come in. It's going to be tough to see the maps, and so one thing that if you're interested in where these are located, send an email to the email address, and I can provide the maps to you, that method, and also gather your input. So next steps with this project, we are going to, in the next few weeks, essentially finalize the location of the passing lanes. So I've got 3 more slides that'll zoom us in a little bit. So going to slide 9. This zooms in on the north end, going from Spangle south. And so there shows 2 proposed northbound and 1 proposed southbound. These would be additional ones. So I'm just going to move right through these. The legend shows what's northbound and southbound by the color. Moving to slide 10. This is kind of a busy map, but it shows where the existing ones are, and in fact the existing one at milepost 56.7 to 57.1 in the middle. People that have driven this route know that that's a fairly short passing lane and really not a sufficient area to pass there. We're looking at extending that and also adding passing lanes at 2 other locations for southbound and 1 at northbound. Moving to slide number 11. This is on the south end of the project. You can see the existing climbing lane coming out of Colfax. And from there on the north end of this particular map, you see proposed northbound and southbound. Altogether, with the existing ones and extension, we'll end up with about 8 total passing opportunities that are within this segment. So when we're looking at where to place these passing lanes, we take a lot of things into consideration. Location, where should we place them? Are there existing geometric constraints? Is there a bridge? Is there an environmental sensitive area? Is there something that's going to be really costly if we decided to widen the road in that spot? And so we try to find places where you can get the best bang for your buck, build as much lane as we can without the cost breaking the bank. Look at the amount of right-of-way we already own and how much do we need to purchase. That's a cost piece of the puzzle too. And also look to see what existing opportunities there are to pass already. We don't want to add a lane where maybe there's a passing opportunity already. That's one school of thought. Another school of thought is, I don't feel comfortable passing unless I have my own lane. And so we're getting feedback that may be competing with that thought itself. So, again, if you have an interest in where these passing lanes go, I can provide the maps via email. If you can read what was on the screen, great. You probably have better eyes than I do. But again, the timeline is over the next few weeks we need to gather the last of the input for the 195. And just to let you know, this project from Colfax to Spangle is scheduled to go to construction in 2017. Okay? The other one I'm going to talk about, it's out there a ways, so I'll go to slide number 12. This project is titled SR26 Dusty to Colfax, and it added climbing lanes. And what we have is a 10-mile segment from about milepost 122 to 132 that we're going to, the scope is to add climbing lanes that will also function as passing lanes. So what is essentially in the really rough initial budget is for 2 each direction, and they'll be from 1 mile to 1.5 miles in length, somewhere within that vicinity, excuse me. The timeline on this one is design would start in the year 2023 with construction in the year 2025. So that's what we know is funded and can move forward with what we know today. That's all I have.
So let me start again by reminding people how we can ask questions. So those of you who are watching live on YouTube, you can enter questions into the chat window that's on your screen. You can also send us an email directly. It is sr26us195@wsdot.wa.gov. So just to let everyone know how much time we have about 50 minutes, give or take, to answer some questions. So I have the list. I'm going to go ahead and direct them to those of you on the panel. We also have them coming in via email. I hope that, I know for camera purposes, that when I say someone's name, it's going to go to one of you, but I also hope that others of you who have a perspective will speak up, and we'll try to be a little bit nimble with that. I don't know that they're loving that, but I also know that there's a lot of expertise in this panel that I hope we can access. I'm going to go ahead and start. We've had a number of questions about rumble strips. The first question actually that we got was, why are there not rumble strips on the side of the road? And then it came up again, would rumble strips be, for 195, be the best way to prevent collisions due to distracted driving? And I think that's kind of a thematic question. And I think we would direct this to Glenn, but I do think that's a thematic question in terms of what are the best ways to address some of the distracted driving, and as rumble strips, is that something that we should be considering? So why are they not there already, and is that a best practice?
So currently on both US 195 and SR 26, both of those routes have rumble strips on the center line of the roadway full length. With the collision type that we're seeing, the overtaking and passing, crossing over, inattentiveness, the opposing traffic is the highest issue of an accident that could happen there. And so that's where we place them first, and we receive the biggest benefit for placing them there. When we have them on the shoulder, on the shoulders, usually we have wider shoulders, and there is some allowance for a vehicle to make more air before it crosses, off of the shoulder. And so we do have them in some locations, but they are only at higher locations where we continue to see run off the roads due to a curve, or it might be something that's related to ice, or the speed of the drivers are too high at those locations. So we do have them in some locations, but not the full length of the highways.
Can I ask a question about that? What does it cost to put in a rumble strip? And is that something that you do just, obviously the legislature, I think, we could tell you to put in a rumble strip, but I imagine that's just WashDOT's own engineering decisions that would do that?
As far as costs, I'm not sure what the costs are, and we can get back to you on that, but it's not as easy as just putting them in, because sometimes when our roadways were built back in the 60s and early 70s, the shoulders didn't have enough depth for us to be able to go grind that in, because we're taking away the roadway part of it. So in some cases, we may have to go build up that 1 foot piece just right outside the fog line to do that, but that's not in all cases. Mike, I think you were going to respond.
So Washington State DOT a few years ago did an initiative to put centerline rumble strips everywhere we could on 2-lane highways. We look at it as a kind of a systematic approach. It's hard to predict where crossing the centerline crash would occur. Rumble strips are, I agree, I can't come up with the cost off the top of my head, Senator, but they're very cost effective. And so the benefit cost of doing the centerline rumble strips was a really impressive number. And so most 2-lane highways in the state of Washington have centerline rumble strips, except in a few locations like Glenn mentioned where the structure of the road isn't sufficient to let us do it. I think the concept that the original question brought up of should we be adding them to the shoulders in more places is one of those notes we took down that we need to investigate further.
Thank you. So that actually raises another question that came up. It came up when it was previously submitted, and it's come up now. And that is, so rumble strips and other infrastructure takes time. What are some things that we can do immediately? This would be a question that I would direct to Mike, but also to Dan and to Melinda, because the second part of it is that what can we do? Could we do something that would be WSU oriented, for example, Cougs Drive Safe, PSAs, those type of things? So what are those type of things that could be implemented more immediately that would be directed at a WSU population and specifically a student population? So Mike, do you want to talk to that first?
Maybe I'll start
Okay.
and just mention an initiative that the state of Washington has, and actually this is a national initiative too, called Target Zero. So and we're going to talk about that more perhaps as the program moves on, but in a nutshell, Target Zero has a goal in the state of Washington of having 0 serious injury or fatal crashes in the state on all roads by the year 2030. And Target Zero lays out 4 key components, and interestingly, they all start with E. But the first one is engineering, right? So does the road meet the kind of standards that you would expect for that kind of volume and that kind of traffic? You know, is it a high freight corridor or whatnot? So there's engineering, and rumble strips are in that. Passing lanes are in that. So we look to, because of our financial situation, really for low-cost, high-impact solutions, like the passing lane project that was funded. I mean, that's a perfect example of a low-cost or a lower-cost solution that we can do. The next part of Target Zero is education. So there's really a lot to this piece, and it's different based on the age group you're trying to meet, and I look forward to a long partnership really with the university here on kind of continuously being able to just-in-time message things with the folks that are here, whether it's students or parents or just people coming to events that are here, you know, helping us change how we're thinking about our drive. Enforcement, so the State Patrol and our other law enforcement partners play a big role in Target Zero, but there's only so many of them, and they can only have so many contacts in any given day. And then the last is emergency response. This is one I found very interesting, and when we did the study on 195 that Bob Hilmes mentioned, it was interesting for me to find out that different emergency responders have different credentials, and especially in rural areas, a first responder to a crash scene might not have the right equipment or credentials to do certain functions. And so if we can change that, and a first responder can do everything, they might actually influence whether a crash is a fatality or a serious injury or something hopefully less. So those are the 4 E's of Target Zero, and I just wanted to lead in because I think a big part of it is through partnership with the university and law enforcement.
So Dan, if you could take the next question, and then Melinda, a question just came in, so I'm going to hold you for the next question because we've talked about it previously. So if you could talk about it from a WSU perspective, what would it look like for us to partner with WSDOT?
Well, obviously, the education component is an important, strategy, and certainly, we are an education institution. It's something that we do well. I think and there's a variety of ways in which we can message to students about highway safety and about attentive driving, et cetera. There's a great number of challenges there because we all know that these problems persist, whether it's on these highways or anywhere else. We have many different risks that we try to mitigate through education with our students, and this needs to be one that we rise in the priority, if you will, in terms of messaging best practices, I guess you could say, to our students. As I was hearing, there's one, your comments, there's one that kind of crosses between engineering, I guess, and education, and that is that I might be wrong, but I don't really recall much in the way of signage or any other type of educational messaging going on these highways, and certainly that would be a place where WSDOT and WSU, I think, could put together some resources to remind students, because I think it's very difficult, with our students, and it's difficult for them to operate, with messaging that's not in real time. I just think that real-time messaging is a lot more effective than, educational programming that is going to occur, let's say during orientation period. The students are inundated with educational messages during orientation period. It hasn't proven to be a very effective approach in mitigating any risky type of behavior. So I think we have to look for some different things, but education can certainly be an important one.
So that actually leads us really well to the next question that came in. Senator Baumgartner spoke at the beginning about WSU being a research institution, and so we have a lot of access to great research here at WSU Center for Innovation. So Melinda, the question that I have for you, which is a very perceptive person, was paying attention to the numbers and said, it sounds like a lot of these accidents are happening between 15 and 25, and we know from brain development that the brain is not fully developed. This question said till 25. I understood it to be 26, but we do know it's not until they are older than many of them have graduated from WSU. So thinking about it from that perspective, how could we access the resources that we have at WSU, and with what you know about how to best interface with students, what could that look like in terms of how we do educate our students on these important issues?
So we have actually some fabulous resources here. Our Human Development Department includes a PhD in prevention science. So we have access to a lot of researchers who are in fact very specifically focused on how does human behavior and development impact these decision-making processes. And so for me, one of the most challenging things is to learn that what seems intuitively educational is often not at all helpful to students, and that what as a parent or as a grown person seems like the right answer, tell them not to do it, in fact has pretty much zero effectiveness. What we have to do is really work intensively with our students and do that kind of investigative research to find out when are they most open to these messages? What messages are most effective? And there is good research on that, and we can move the needle on a lot of these things, but we have to come to it with a really open mind and investigate rather than assume that we know. what the answer is. And so, but we're a land grant institution. We have 125 years of experience in partnering with the people of the state to bring our research expertise on the ground to what we want to do for the state. And so I have a lot of confidence that we already know how to do this kind of work. And it's just a matter of bringing the intention, the resources, and the need together. I know we can produce some really innovative things that will work.
We also have a really unique expert on the panel. Doreen, you have a daughter at WSU, and I know that you've talked with her a lot. And you have another daughter who has graduated, who's doing her master's, but I know that she drove with you to Pullman right now. So what do your conversations look like with your daughters as you talk about this important issue of road safety? You drive from Yakima to Pullman, and so those are roads that you are very thoughtful about when you suggest the route for your daughter.
Right. They always want to take the back way, the fast way, and when she's by herself, I encourage her to, take the 4-lane road as long as she can, and then unfortunately it's 2 lanes, and timing, daytime. Maybe her friend will follow her to and from school, so there'll be more than one car. So speed, obviously, and the phone, the texting. We talk a lot about it. Yeah, both of them.
So parents and family members are another important constituency for us to figure out how to interface with, because you're talking directly to your kids a lot more in a different way than we are as an institution.
Right.
Thank you. We've had a couple of questions come in, Mike Frucci, about the roads and when they were built and when the improvements were done, and do the roads as they are built now, do they accommodate population growth both for Pullman and for WSU? So I'd love for you to tell us about that and share what you know.
Okay, well, I have a few notes about that because it's a lot of data. So I'll just refer to these notes. But currently, and I think Glenn mentioned this a little bit, Highway 195 has generally 12-foot lanes and shoulders that vary from 4 to 10 feet. Highway 26 has some lanes that are 12 foot, some that are 11, and the shoulders on Highway 26 vary from 4 feet to 8 feet. Both of these roads became part of the state highway system back in the 1930s. There certainly have been improvements over that time. I think somebody asked if there's federal and state guidelines that address, how many lanes we have for a certain volume of traffic, and certainly there is. There's a document called the Highway Capacity Manual and another document called the Highway Safety Manual, and both of those are national guidelines that state agencies and local agencies use for roadway criteria. Let's see, there was some information. Let's see. In regards to improvements that have been made over time, and this is, I think, relevant to the growth down here, and I think the traffic numbers, as we work on the roads, the Federal Highways has criteria that they kind of put projects in that's called 1R, 2R, 3R, and 4R, and so most of the roads in eastern Washington have been addressed over time to what Federal Highways would call 3R standards, and that's how we end up with kind of standard 4-foot width shoulders and standard slopes off the edge of the road. And so, these two roads meet all of those criteria. In terms of volumes and how many lanes there are, and you saw in the information that Glenn presented, that generally we get up around 12,000 vehicles a day before we start considering a need for 4 lanes. So does that sound right, Glenn?
It's a little closer to 20,000, around
Okay.
18,000.
So, and so plus or minus a couple there. I mean, you see from the information that Glenn presented, these routes have significantly lower traffic volumes than that on an average basis. And I think one of the challenges here is events. And so whether that's the beginning or end of a break, move in for school, or certainly, any event weekend like a football game. Certainly there's significantly more traffic than what the average is, but that's kind of the rule of thumb for how agencies across the nation look at the facility like this. You can't spend the amount of money it takes for a one-day event and then the whole rest of the year that facility is just not being used. That's not an efficient use of funding, especially in the funding climate that we have today. So we try to be very practical about where we utilize the funds. And again, solutions like rumble strips and passing lanes, those are practical solutions that we can find funding for.
So Senator Baumgartner talked at the beginning about, I think you expressed that this was a really important public policy purpose for Washington State University and WSDOT to come together with you and to have this conversation with the public, both in person and online. One of the questions that we got, Senator Baumgartner, addresses this, is it best to have a 4-line road? Is it best to address it through these other measures? And was actually wondering if it might be appropriate to do a study, because there is this unusual.
Fathers decided to put the state's university, and we do have this, I think, bigger bump than normal by increasing transportation lengths because of and so it's a good return on investment. I don't think that the standard metrics necessarily apply, and that's why we did the funding that we did. As I said previously, the state doesn't do big funding projects that frequently, and we have, it's kind of every 10 years if you look on average. And so where would more money come from if we were going to move projects up? Well, it could come from savings. We could have some projects where there may be savings across the state where we would look at reallocating resources. If there was an exceptionally strong demand from the public, we obviously could go back and look at additional funding resources. That's probably not there right now, practically speaking. But I think, at the end of the day, you get the government that you work for, and to some extent that you deserve. And so I hope this forum can be a lead-in to more active participation by people in Eastern Washington on their funding systems and the transportation funding decisions. And so, politicians represent the people and have to go through a job application process every 2 or 4 years. And so we have another job reapplication process coming this November. And so these are great topics to bring up for people that are running for office. We have a gubernatorial election this November, and it's great for the people of Eastern Washington and for in this part of the state to express what they want to see in the transportation decisions, and that will help because, we really look at our Department of Transportation. What we want DOT to be is we want them to be technocrats, really, really good engineers, really, really good policy people, and we want them to be somewhat, by design, immune from the political day-to-day pressures and representation. I mean, that's the job of the legislature, that's the job in the governor's office, and so I think the short answer is if the people really, really want it and they express that in a vibrant way, it will probably happen.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
I just wanted to make
Please.
one point.
Yeah.
In response to that, because I think what Senator Baumgartner is talking about revealed itself, I would presume, in the road between Pullman and Moscow, which obviously was an extremely unsafe road for our students and has been converted to essentially a 5-lane road of 2 lanes plus a middle lane, and that has been something really that the university has welcomed, and our students travel that road frequently. We have a large number of faculty and staff that live and make that in Idaho and make that trek every day. So certainly we appreciate the investment that the state made on that highway, which was, I'm not sure what year, but you probably know.
And I guess I would add on the question of the study, I'm always interested in the legislature, and I'm the chair of Commerce and Labor in the legislature, and I used to be the vice chair of Ways and Means, and kind of the way the legislature works, it's like taking college classes. There's kind of 4 periods during the day, and you can only take classes that don't compete with each other. And so Ways and Means and Transportation are at the same time. They're at the end of the day, and I'm on the Transportation Committee. And the reason I joined primarily was because I knew the state was going to do a big transportation package, and I wanted to be involved in that. But in any event, I'm always very interested in learning best practices from other states, because we're certainly not the only rural campus in the country. And we're certainly not the only campus full of 17 to 25-year-olds that sometimes don't make the best decisions. So I think there are a lot of things that we can look at and learn from other states. One of the reasons I'm so excited about President Schultz joining WSU is because he's from Kansas State. So as we've been sitting here, I'm kind of curious, well, how do they deal with his situation at KSU? And I think we can learn some things. And I guess the other thing I would say in public policy is, while I appreciate target zero, and that should be the goal, we do have to look at a cost-benefit analysis of all these things, as cold as that may sound, where we do have to take a step back sometimes from the passions of what's happening and really look at where is the best investment, and the best return. And Project Zero is a great goal and should be the goal, but it would probably be unrealistic. We have to weigh that against the economy and the speeds that people need to drive and other issues. So I think a lot can be done on student behavior from learning best practices from other states. But as a policymaker, we're looking at a range of options, including economic growth and other functions that we're balancing.
So another question came in as we were having this conversation, which is, what about some alternative ways to get around? So, and that's kind of a two-part question. Has there been any option to a type of a bus service, maybe a faster bus service or more regular bus service between Pullman and Spokane, which I thought was interesting? And then have we, as an institution, ever considered subsidizing bus service so that students could actually get to some of these population centers, and it would be something that the university would participate in? So I think, Dan, I would look to you, but Senator Baumgartner would also look to you, and Mike Frucci to you.
Well, first of all, Senator Baumgartner, I can tell you exactly what happened at Kansas State, actually, because I was from there, and also Oklahoma State, and in both those cases, they put in a 4-lane highway from the interstate to those campuses. Now, I will say it's 15 to 20 miles in each of those two cases, so it's a little bit easier one to deal with. Well, there is bus service that we actually that the local Wheatland, I guess, does back and forth at peak times to and from Spokane, to and from Seattle. They tend to run those from campus. So those are options. I don't think we have I don't think we provide any subsidy for that. There was a study done on bus service and other options, actually using the land grant model that Dr. Husky was talking about. The students in, I believe it was planning, looked at bus service as well as light rail from Spokane. But nonetheless, I think those are options we should explore, or those particular ones, particularly as around peak events such as end of semester or spring break, fall break, et cetera. We certainly would be interested in exploring those with both the private and the public sector.
Would you know if is there much activity for car sharing for, say to Spokane or Tri-Cities or Seattle, kind of your main transportation destinations? Is that something that the university participates in, or is that just sort of something students do on their own?
Do you know the answer to that, Melinda?
We facilitate students making connections for car sharing, especially around break, and we actually, the buses stop right outside my office for spring break and for fall break, to send students to Olympia, to Seattle, to Spokane. And we partner with University of Idaho actually on that too, so we're able to really efficiently move a certain number of students. There's even one that goes to Boise, although we don't have a lot of subscribers from this campus for the Boise trip. But so we both facilitate the car sharing, the ride sharing. Facebook has made that a lot easier. And the social media outlets have made that a lot easier, and then we do have the bus service.
I guess I would comment on the, in this most recent transportation package, there was a significant amount of funding made available for transit that was reserved for transit. I'm not aware how much of that was thought of in terms of rural transit or what those options might look like. I think that would be one of those areas where the legislature, if there was a rural transit subsidized route that I think was doing well in another state, and somebody came to the legislature that said, hey, here's a model that works at specific times of year. I think that's something that the legislature would look favorably towards in terms of a pilot project or these sorts of things, if there was good evidence that a case would be made. So I think that's something interesting to think about.
Doreen, you talked about with your daughter encouraging her to ride with friends, and Dr. Husky, you talked about ride share. I would ask WashDOT, maybe Glenn or Mike, you would have information. Is there data that shows that if people are riding together that it's safer and some of these driver behavior issues, are they reduced? Do we know that?
Well, basically, it depends upon what the activities are in the vehicle.
So it's on the kids.
18 to 24-year age bracket, sometimes we can get a little goofy. We've all been that age, but as far as the amount of vehicles on the roadway, it can greatly open up the roadways from that regard. And also what it can do is you do have the peer pressure factor of, what are you doing? Get off your phone, or slow down, or no, get back in your lane. We're not going to pass the 10 cars ahead of us because we only have a mile of sight distance. And that is a huge component in that age bracket, is the peer pressure. And that can be seen as a positive rather than a negative, and it can make a positive difference.
I had a question just about some of these statistics, and maybe you can comment, maybe perhaps anecdotally, perhaps from the data, but we see these, that there's a preponderance of, whatever it is, 18 to 25-year-olds involved in the accidents, et cetera. How does that compare with the volume of that age group on these highways? In other words, okay, there's 49% of or whatever it was, of the 15 to 25 involved in crashes, but I mean, is there 49% 15 to 25-year-olds on the roads? Do you see that this age group, and particularly college students, is the primary, if you will, source of the driver behavior issues that you're seeing on these roads?
Basically, I'd have to answer it in this fashion. 10 months out of the year, the population of Whitman County spikes by approximately 30,000 people, and that would be the Washington State University population. And so we do see that statistic bear out during that time period. And as far as the rest of the demographics of the county, it would be the other age brackets that are involved, and it's not specifically that age bracket. Please don't equate it to any type of irresponsibility. It's just that that's a big, huge component on 195 and 26.
One mitigation factor that hasn't been discussed yet would be increased state patrol and increased trooper activity. Is that something that would reduce these incidents substantially, or?
Well, I think we can all speak, everybody in this room, that when you do see the white car with blue lights, you're probably going to behave a little better than normal. And that would be Senator, honestly, that would be a situation where we'd have to bring in more manpower for this area. And the legislature can make that happen, and I believe it would make a positive difference.
We've had a few questions that have come in about kind of going to the infrastructure point. In addition to the rumble strips, Mike, we've had questions that have been, would increased lighting along the highway make a difference? And there's also been some comments that the paint on the roads is diminished and is less visible. And so would those also be some options that would help with visibility for distracted drivers, for keeping people from crossing the lane?
Okay, so I think in terms of the striping, so it's something I think we struggle with throughout eastern Washington, where we have our snow and ice conditions, and when you have your snow removal activities, whether that's sand or studded tires or plowing, that's tough on the striping, the paint stripe that's on the road, and it is something that we work hard to refurbish it. We do every stripe everywhere at least once annually, and we target other high-volume locations like Interstate 90 more often. The rumble strips, I think, because we have centerline rumble strips the whole length, those help delineate that center line, whether the stripe's there or not. Something else we see is that because the paint is on the vertical face of the grooved-in rumble strips, that paint tends to stay there longer because nothing rubs it off. So, but good point about delineation. Delineation in general is important, especially for folks that are driving in the evening or when there's rainy conditions. So it's a good point and one that we work on. More lighting on the road. I think the data shows a majority of the crashes these roads experience is during daylight hours. It's not really a good fiscal decision to put the investment in lighting for the full length of these roads, whether it be just the cost of putting it in or the cost of operating them, but targeting locations. So if we have a particular intersection that's problematic, that lighting would be at an intersection, something that we would look at. One of the things that we didn't mention, just kind of for time, but along both of these routes, there's a number of intersections that we're going to do work on this summer to enhance driver awareness, or just the feeling of the driver that you're at an intersection. So you'll see this summer some changes in signing at intersections along 195 and 26. Not all intersections, but a number of them. So increased signing. We're doing some work to try some wider stripes to kind of give the driver that visual cue that they're at an intersection, and to give more thought to what's going on around them. So those kind of things we're trying to do with delineation to help.
We had a really interesting point that was raised, and that is, a lot of people don't know this, but many of our students come from, as you pointed out, Olympia, Tacoma, the Seattle area, and they're not as familiar driving on rural roads and some of the issues that you have with respect to wildlife and also with respect to inclement weather. Are there some things that we could or should be doing with the student population around those unique driving conditions that they're going to see a lot more of here around Pullman than they are around Olympia, Tacoma, or Seattle? And I think
one of the biggest things is the educational component on that. Now, obviously, those of us here that do live in rural eastern Washington, we know that the deer population has spiked, and we do have a lot of car-deer collisions, and especially at night, and especially during the fall when the hunting season kicks off, we do see a significant uptick. And so basically it's just educating the driver on what to do if a deer does run out in the middle of the roadway. And the obvious answer is you slam on your brakes and you do not swerve, because the roll factor of the car is 60%. If you do swerve to miss a deer, or you go into the other lane and now it's a head-on collision. So it's 50-50 if you just slam on your brakes, whether you will hit the deer. Or we can replace cars, but we can't replace human beings. And or 50% of an opportunity for that deer just to move out of your way so you can go beyond your trip. The other component on Oh, the snow and ice does wonders for us every year. But the bottom line there is slow down. We do deal with a lot of people that will say, well, I wasn't speeding. It's posted 60. I was going 55 miles an hour on compact snow and ice. And I'm getting a lot of smiles in this room because everybody knows that's still too fast. And slow down meaning we've run code to major collisions during bad snowstorms on compact snow and ice. Me personally, where I am running code going 32 miles an hour in my patrol car because that's what the roadway conditions have dictated. And probably as a side note to jump on, we've had a great relationship with WSU, WSDOT, and the State Patrol. And I believe it was in 2013, we utilized our social media resources where WSDOT was working on the bridges in north of Colfax, the infamous Y by the Chevron station where you can turn left to go to State Route 26, or you can continue northbound on 195. And we immediately met because the bridge work was delaying traffic. It was going to be the start of spring break, and you can imagine what kind of delays were going to take place. And we knew WSDOT was not going to be working on the bridge on Friday, but as we all know in this room, when you have the opportunity to be gone from school for a full week, we're going to leave Wednesday or Thursday. And so what we did is we partnered together and we utilized the forum that our 18 to 24-year-old students is going to utilize. And at the time, it was the archaic Facebook, which I'm being told is outdated, and the also outdated Twitter forum. And I guess now it's Snapchat and some other things. And so anyway, we utilized those two forums, and we had no collisions, we had no backups, and we had probably the best start to a spring break I can remember in over a decade. So these are just some of the things, the partnerships that we have together that I know time doesn't permit us to go through all of them, but we are trying to make a positive difference for our population here in Whitman County.
I heard Dr. Husky, you said Instagram, right? It's interesting, and I said Snapchat. Some of the questions that we've gotten and some of what you've talked about here is, well, what could we do with respect to signage and other ways that we could get their attention quickly? And both Snapchat and Instagram are so visual, and we had some questions come in terms of, well, what would make a big impact on students? And those are certainly really heavily used and very visual ways of communicating with students, and so certainly we could probably have some ideas that would come from there. We have time for one more question, and there's actually a very broad question. And so that's probably a great place for us to end because I think it captures a lot of what we're talking about. And I'm just going to read the question verbatim, and it says, how can the state of Washington promote a meaningful change in driver behavior? And so what is the best practice? Because we've talked about infrastructure, we've talked about the unique population in terms of age that we're dealing with here, and it being a research institution. So what is the best way to impact driver behavior if we think about what we're trying to address here tonight?
We can do what we can do, and we can only do so much. The bottom line is it comes down to, and here we go, personal responsibility. People just being responsible out on our roadways, and understanding that it's their responsibility to operate the vehicle in a safe manner, making that choice not to make the unsafe pass, not making the choice not to put the old metal, the pedal to the metal, and that right there, personal responsibility, taking responsibility for operating that vehicle safely is what can make it a huge positive difference out on our roadways.
Senator Baumgartner, do you want to add?
Well, you know, an aspect of that I think legislature is very interested in is this issue of texting while driving. And actually, I was driving over Snoqualmie Pass a couple months ago, and I actually had a young lady who passed me who was watching a video, watching a movie while she was driving, single occupant. So, you know, I think that one specifically is one that maybe there's peer pressure, student groups working together and texting. And I think, again, you know, I'd be interested in what other states are doing that have seen that behavior. That has been a piece of policy. There was the legislature, I think in 2000, before I got there, I think it was about 2008, 2009, made it illegal to talk on a cell phone while driving, but there's some ambiguity about whether one could actually be texting or not. To the degree that that's even enforced. But I think more than the enforcement, because it's very difficult for a trooper to pull somebody over while they're texting. I mean, it can happen, but would be what can be done with social media and peer pressure and other groups working together to try and ostracize that and bring that down. So I think that's one that the legislature has a real interest in.
Glenn, did you? Yeah, Melinda, go ahead.
Jump in, but I have a son who just finished driver's ed, and so this is fresh in my mind. I think this is another pipeline issue where we have the opportunity to really impact in the same way that we have with public health messages about smoking. If we hit young students frequently enough with messages about texting and driving, I know that my children are very attentive to people touching their phones during times when mom is driving and are very eager to remind me that I should not in any way put my hand on my phone while driving at any time. And so I think we can reach a point where we start early, we keep repeating the messages, and then we use varying methods as they get older. We may be able to really impact that.
Glenn, I thought you had, yeah.
Yeah, I think what I would add to that is just like at Washington State DOT, one of the things that we push really hard is safety. And so before we start an action, we do a pre-activity safety plan so we know what we're going to do. And I think we got to educate the drivers that before you hop in that car, you have to make the decision. I'm going to drive the speed limit. I'm going to put my phone away, and I'm going to travel during daylight hours, good conditions. I'm going to check the conditions. And it's got to be messaged over and over again, and otherwise it just never gets into their habits.
We have in the audience our Vice President for Research who has been talking about this a lot and establishing a safety culture. Melinda's heard, we've all been talking about this, even things like, don't use your cell phone when you're walking down the stairs so that we can create a safety culture and not have accidents. Let me capture some of what I heard. So I heard we talked about signage, that we will look in to see what we could do jointly with Washington State University and WSDOT with respect to signage that could be, say, co-branded on these important roads that would be really speak specifically to students. Educational message, Melinda, have talked about that, what we can do before we do something on campus, and I'll have you talk about that in a second, but before we do something on campus, we could talk about how we could engage with students through social media, through email. Senator Baumgartner, you talked about potentially looking at some bus options around high traffic times and to see if there might be something that we could look at with respect to transit, so we could have that conversation further. I thought the rumble strips, Mike, I heard you say that you would look into that to see if maybe that might be an infrastructure option that would be lower cost, but it might have high impact. And then I thought, Melinda, your point at the end in terms of driver's ed, I think that's a policy issue. We can perhaps look at for some requirements around driver's ed with respect to educating and cell phone use, at least, at the very least. So what I want to do is, Dr. Husky, if you could talk for a minute about what we might do in the fall on campus in collaboration with WSDOT, what that might look like, not just for this fall, but going forward. I think that would be really important.
So I think something that is really important is to recognize that this is not a one and done kind of operation. And so we would be looking to plan regular, repetitive messages that would really drive the key elements of whatever safety initiatives we want to start with at a variety of places. I know the impulse is orientation because we get students on campus and we want to do something with them, but President Bernardo is exactly right. They are so occupied with basic needs like eating, sleeping, making friends. We can't expect to be effective then. 6 weeks in, though, we have a window of opportunity to really deliver a message that would be helpful. And so I think we would be looking at messaging before each break and before and at the intersemester breaks so that we could really hit them at a time when it was timely and important. We'll want to really work the communication side of this and make sure that we're targeting messages in a really effective way that reaches them. Social media is really effective, but we need to time that so that they're not looking at messages as they're getting into their cars. Right? I mean, there's a lot of logistic planning that will need to go into this. Doreen and I had the chance to talk a little bit before the forum began, and talked about looking to, we share a parent handbook with the parents of new students in the weeks prior to them coming to campus, where we sort of frame things that it's helpful to talk about with your student before he or she comes to college. And this would be a messaging piece that we could also put in there. So while you're talking about finances and sexual decision-making and other risky behaviors, you can also be talking about driving choices and road safety and some of those key messages that we want to have a safe conversation at home with parents about even before you start your campus career. So I think we have lots of opportunities.
Doreen, thank you. Thank you again for the petition. Thank you for helping us pull together for this evening. Are there any thoughts that you'd like to offer us before we conclude?
I just want to thank everybody, present and online. We can do some great things.
Thank you. Senator Baumgartner?
Well, once again, thanks to WSU and to WSDOT for putting this together. Again, people need to participate in the process, and it's exciting that this is a way that we can do that. I'm looking forward to these improvements on Highway 195 and 26. Obviously, 195, we're going to have these 7 new passing lanes, areas of passing lanes in 2017. It is my hope that working with the public, we can bring that timeline of Highway 26 even further forward. I think there may be some ways to do that. People need to be active and talk to the legislators, talk to their governor about that being important. And I'm always keen to make sure that Eastern Washington is getting our fair share of transportation funding, and I actually like us getting more than our fair share of transportation funding. So I'll look forward to working on that. But thank you for including me in this discussion this evening.
Thank you for coming. Dr. Bernardo, would you like to give some final comments for WSU?
Sure. One specific comment that has struck me through this discussion was the comment about poor weather driving and driving in rural areas, because again, 85% of our students are from Washington State. 85% of the 85% are from the other side of the mountains, and I think that is something that we should really should look at as we put together an educational program. I think we should also bring another partner to the table, and that is the city of Pullman and the Pullman PD, because the lion's share of these students actually live off campus. And it's not only dangerous on our highways, it's dangerous on our Pullman roads. It's a really difficult community to navigate in the snow because of the hills and the nature of how Pullman's laid out. So we certainly do appreciate everybody's participation, and we look forward to really trying to make this work. I think Dr. Husky said it exactly right. This is not a one and done. This is going to require continual messaging. One thing that's interesting about being at a university is everybody cycles through every 4 years. So even if you do a good job, there's a whole new crew of this fall we'll have roughly about 5,800 or so new students, in Pullman, and that's a whole new educational opportunity and challenge.
So Mike, for WSDOT, do you want to
Well-
talk a little bit more about Target 02 or?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks for this opportunity, and we couldn't have done this without WSU's leadership in providing the technology, and it's not something we have the ability to do within our own resources, so thank you for that. I want to remind everyone, if we didn't answer your question, or if simply you want to further the conversation or get more information from us, please send us an email to the email address, and I'm sure Colleen will mention it again, but the chat room comments don't get captured permanently, so it's important to send us to that email address so that we can work with you. One of the things I'd love to hear from the panel, but especially those of you that have taken time out of your evening to watch us online, is feedback on how this format worked for you. Again, this is new, and so if this is a good format, we want to build on it and do it better, and we can only do that with your feedback because we're sitting here, we're not watching it, so we want to make sure it worked for you, and any feedback you can give us through the email address would be much appreciated. One of the things that struck me during the conversation, we really focused in on, I'll just use round numbers, but 50% of the crashes were related to people in the 15 to 25 or so age group. And I think Dr. Bernardo makes a good point that perhaps that's a demographic of the users of the road too. We don't have data, we don't survey the drivers, we just know it from the crash reports. But what struck me next was that means the other 50% is all the rest of us. And so while I think there's huge opportunity to work with all of the talent that's down here to try to come up with innovative ways to do just-in-time messaging and stuff for that, the students here, I think we don't want to forget the other 50%. And so a lot of these solutions too, I think we can hopefully do in a way that, you know, just the alumni that are coming back for games or the parents that are coming over, so that, you know, there's the other 50%. We don't want to forget about them. They're just as important as the, you know, the students. We want to get to target zero for everyone. So I've already mentioned some about target zero, so I don't want to go over that again. But I think as we close out, Colleen's going to close us out here in a minute. But I encourage you, there's a very short video that the team here is going to run for those of you that are online. I believe it's 5 minutes or so long. It's a video that the state of Washington did about target zero, and I think you'll find it very interesting. So I hope that you'll take a few minutes to stay online and watch it.
Thanks, Mike. So let me give you the email address one more time. It is sr26us195@wsdot.wa.gov.wa.gov. So I want to thank all of our panelists. Thank you. I know that some of you had to come to Pullman tonight, so we really appreciate it. And some of you have had very long days also, so I really appreciate that. I know that I can speak for all of us at Washington State University. We really look forward to the ongoing conversation. We really appreciated hearing from WSDOT. And Doreen, again, thank you so much for starting this conversation, but we really look forward to next steps. Thank you for those of you in the audience. This was live. It will be recorded. It'll be on the WSDOT YouTube channel, so people will be able to continue to access this for a period of time. And as we have more forums that are recorded, they will be accessed there as well. And you can certainly reach out to all of us via our email. Our webpage is governmentrelations.wsu.edu, and there are email addresses there that you can access us through. So thank you again, and good night.
Oh my, I really don't know the number. 50,000? Is that? It's just a wild guess.
40,000.
I'd say around 10 to 20,000.
Oh, it's in the thousands, maybe 19, 20,000.
I would say maybe 1,000, maybe more.
Approximately 10 million?
Yeah, I was going to say about 1 to 2 million, actually.
500,000.
Maybe 3,000, 4,000? Sure, I'm not even anywhere close.
Maybe 9,000.
5,000?
Oh, let's see. I think it's getting down around 30,000. It was 50,000 when I was a boy, but it's gone down somewhat. So.
Oh. 2,000.
Oh, probably cell phone use, easily.
Probably speeding.
Drunk driving.
Texting, drunk driving.
Probably like drinking drinking and driving and texting and driving.
And drugs and...
I suppose inattention for one reason or another.
Texting probably. Cell phones. Car stereos.
Alcohol.
And playing on your phone.
Probably distracted drivers.
Speed.
No. Won't happen. No.
No, that'll never happen.
Probably not.
No.
No.
I don't think we ever will.
No, I do not.
Not in this
Afraid
age.
not.
People are stupid.
I don't think so.
A realistic one would be a few hundred.
Less than 100?
Less than 500 a year. 200.
Maybe like 1,000.
5,000 a year. 600, 700.
Get it down to under 100.
600.
Mom?
Yeah.
Mom in the back?
Maybe like, like 100. Is that doable, 100? Zero. Zero accidents.
Oh, zero, of course.
Zero.
Yeah, zero.
None.
Zero. Absolutely zero per year.
Zero. Absolutely.
0 is a good goal.
Zero, for certain.
Well, a couple of them I'd like to run over, if that would help your numbers any.
Oh, zero. I would want zero.
Zero.
None.
Zero.
None.
Zero.
Like, none. I don't want any fatalities. But...
Well, zero, of course.
Yes.
Of course.
Yes. Yes, it should.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Of course.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there shouldn't be any deaths on the road.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
that would be
Let's
great.
keep our roads safe and our
Yeah.
families together.
It makes sense, doesn't it? To have a goal of 0 traffic deaths for your family? If we all have a goal of 0, then we can make it there. It's Washington's goal, 0 fatalities by the year 2030. How many people die on U.S. roads every year? About 33,000. And for every death, there are about 3 serious injuries. In Washington State, there were 437 deaths on our roads last year. The good news is that we're making progress towards our statewide goal of 0. Traffic crashes have been steadily declining in recent years. What are the leading causes of traffic crashes? Most serious crashes involve drivers who are impaired by drugs and/or alcohol and drivers who are speeding. A lot of work is being done in Washington to decrease traffic crashes, but we need everyone to do their part. Here's a list of some things that you can do to reach Target 0 for your family. If you drink and/or use marijuana, don't drive. Make plans beforehand for how you'll get around. Ask your friends and family about their plans too. Identify a sober, designated driver. Watch your speed. It's simple physics. The faster you're going, the less time you'll have to respond, and the worse the crash will be. Pay attention. Keep your hands on the wheel, your eyes and mind on the road. Distraction plays a role in 30% of all traffic crashes. And wear your seatbelt on every trip, and wear it correctly. Seatbelts save lives. With each of us taking an active role in traffic safety, together we will reach Target 0. To see the entire Target 0 plan, go to targetzero.com.